and keep his eyes open, blast anything that came through. His concern, and the careful way he let it show, meant something to her. It really did, but not enough to stop her. She pushed through the glass doors and walked into the lobby, her Beretta already in her hand but with the safety still on. One more thing Arkeley had taught her. She approached the desk as if she wanted to rent a storage locker, then leaned over it to look at the floor behind the counter. The carpet there was slick with coagulating blood. There were 2 bodies behind the counter, as advertised. One wore a uniform shirt and sat slumped forward over a security monitor, his neck torn open in a wide red gash. The other wore a janitor's coveralls, and his open eyes stared up at the acoustic ceiling tiles. His right arm was missing. She backed up a step, then turned to look at the elevator bank at the left side of the lobby. One of the elevators stood partially open, the door kept from closing by something wedged in the jamb. She bent down and saw exactly what she expected. It was the janitor's missing arm that held the door, the fingers pointed inward like a sign telling her where to go next. That kind of thing passed for a joke among vampires. She'd learned not to let their sick humor get to her. She picked up the arm. She had no worries about ruining fingerprints, since vampires lacked them, and placed it, as reverently as she could, to one side. Then she stepped into the elevator and let the door close behind her. Someone had already pushed the button for the 3rd floor. Exactly 27 minutes earlier, according to Caxton's watch, someone had placed a call to the SSU's tip line. That wasn't so uncommon. Ever since the massacre at Gettysburg, people were seeing vampires in their back gardens and going through their dumpsters and loitering outside of shopping malls all the time. Caxton and Glower had run down every one of those leads and found nothing worthy of note. This call had been different, however. She'd heard a recording of the call, and it had made her skin creep. The caller's voice had been inhuman, a rough growl, the words slurred as they were drooled out through a mouthful of vicious teeth. The caller hadn't wasted any time, instead just reeling off a street address in Mechanicsburg and announcing, "Tell Laura Caxton I'm waiting for her there. I'll wait until she comes." A trap. An obvious trap. Arkeley had loved it when the vampires would set traps, because then you actually knew where they were. The vampires loved traps because they were predators and often lazy, and they loved it when their victims came to them. Now, Arkeley was one of them, but she had somehow expected more of him. The arm in the elevator door wasn't his style either, but that didn't mean anything. It had been 2 months since he'd changed, since he'd accepted the curse. He'd done it for all the right reasons, of course. He'd believed it was the only way to save Caxton's life. He'd probably been right about that, as he was with most things. There had been only one flaw in his reasoning. When a human being dies and returns as a vampire, he loses some of his humanity. With every night that passes, he loses a little more. Arkeley had been a passionate crusader once, a killer of monsters. Now, every time he crawled into his coffin, a little less of him crawled out. In the end, every vampire became the same creature, a junkie for blood, a sociopath with a sadistic streak, a pure and ruthless killer. A bell chimed inside the elevator door, and then the door slid open. She stepped out onto the 3rd floor, with her handgun at the level of her shoulders, clutched in both hands. She kept her ears and her eyes open, and she tried to be ready for anything. She tried to be ready to see him, to see Arkeley, and to be ready to shoot on sight. Arkeley had never thought of himself as her mentor. She'd been useful to him in a very limited way, and so he'd requisitioned her as a partner. Sometimes he'd used her to do his legwork, the way she used Glower now. More often, Arkeley